Number 1. Grave Walk. I went to high school in the early 1990s. I transferred schools a whole lot growing up, being in some radically different areas. But when I entered school as a sophomore, I lived in this really quiet little town, out in the far suburbs. I have always been a bit outspoken. When I realized that I was gay, I was none too secret about it. Now don't get me wrong, I didn't go dancing down the street under a ton of rainbows or anything like that. But I didn't try to hide it from anyone either. At the time, I was the only openly gay kid in my entire high school, and even though it seemed like I wouldn't have had it in that town and school, I actually had a whole lot of support. Then there was this kid named Sean. He was a grade lower than I was, but he actually hanged out with my group of friends as well. There was a lot of friendship overlap. One of my female friends had a crush on him, but he turned her down because he thought that he might be gay. Now the two of us were friendly toward one another, but we really didn't know each other very well. I was also 2 years older than him at the time, so even though I thought he was cute, I wasn't attracted to him, so I never asked him out or anything. I have always admitted that I have had things a lot luckier than a lot of guys around my time. I had really supportive friends, and although my family wasn't immediately very supportive, they were at least not critical of me in any way. So I never had problems dealing with things growing up when it came to being gay. When I was a senior and Sean was a sophomore, I had an odd experience. I used to take these long walks around town, really late at night. There was never anyone else out late at night. In fact, it was even rare for a car to drive by very often, so my walks were something that I could do to feel like I was alone and by myself. There was a cemetery that wasn't too far away from my house. I always used to like walking through it. There were plenty of paths that you could walk along, and there were never any lights. I enjoyed the darkness and the solitude, as it was the only place around that I could get such things. I was walking along, deep in the cemetery and deep in my thoughts, when I heard the strangest thing. It sounded like somebody was running around on the paths. It was very fast footfalls. I looked up and down the path. It was very dark, but my eyes were trying to adjust really fast, and when they did, I saw some sort of figure moving toward me very quickly, but it was still too dark for me to make out any details for a moment. But I had to admit that I was pretty frightened, and I was scared to wonder what possibly was going on. When the figure got closer to me, I was able to see a bit more. It was someone who looked like they were obviously hurt. He had a bit of a severe limp in his run, and he looked like he had the crap beaten out of him. He stopped when he saw me, and I noticed, even in the dark, that it was Sean, the other gay guy in school. Sean was hysterical, but he stopped when he got up to me. He recognized me at first, and then I noticed that he was bleeding from the nose and mouth. Coupled with the limping, I was pretty concerned. "Someone's after me," he told me. "Please help me." After that, I looked up and further down the road where Sean had run from, and it was then that I saw another person standing off in the distance. This person was still far enough away that I couldn't make out who it was. However, if they were pursuing Sean, they stopped when they saw that he was with me. At any moment, I expected this person to start coming toward the both of us, so I stood there for a moment, holding my friend and trying not to budge. After a few moments, though, the person retreated. Afterward, I did my best to help Sean get out of the graveyard. I asked him if he needed to go to the hospital, or if he wanted me to help him get home. He told me the scariest thing of the night. He had been at home. The person who had beaten the crap out of him was his older brother, who did so because he didn't want to have a gay brother. So all I could think of was to offer to let him sleep the night over at my house. He accepted. So I got him cleaned up and I let him sleep in my bedroom. The next morning, though, Sean was gone. I simply figured he had left and gone home, but he didn't come to school the following week. None of our friends had heard anything from him either. It was later revealed that Sean was yet another gay teenage runaway. I checked recently with some of our friends from high school, and they confirmed that they had never heard from him again after that day. So honestly, I have no idea what ever happened to him. But with what I know about teenage runaways, it's likely that he may have died a very long time ago.
Number 2. Magazine. This happened when I was a teenager. We weren't as lucky as the people today. We didn't have the internet and access to porn and stuff, so getting to see someone naked was not an easy thing to do. But I was able to go to the store and buy a Playgirl, even though I was underage to do it. I had this case that I kept my tapes in. The bottom came out, and I hid the Playgirl in there. Well, I was still in the closet at the time. I was only 16, and my older brother, who hated gays, was 18. One day I was looking at the Playgirl, and my brother opened the door to come into my room. I really quickly shoved it to the bottom of the tape case. He didn't see what I had, but he knew I had something, and he automatically told me to take it out and to show him. I told him no and that it was none of his business. He was a bit of an asshole back then, so he said everything I did was his business and demanded I give it to him. I was terrified. What would happen if he found out I had a Playgirl magazine? I held onto the tape case for dear life, but my brother was big and strong, and he tried everything to pull it away from me. I was able to break free of him though, and I ran into the kitchen where the telephone was. While my brother was pissed and he came into the kitchen, he kept trying to take the tape case away from me. It was the only time I remember being able to resist him, and he was being overly aggressive. I was terrified. At one point, I actually pulled out a steak knife. He didn't even care, he just dared me to stab him with it. Of course I wouldn't have, but I was trying to get him to leave me alone. I don't know how I did it, but eventually I was able to get the phone and call our mum at work. I was crying and telling her what he was doing, and she was like, "Get him on the phone." Bless my mum, she put him in his place, and he stopped bothering me. I was so scared to be outed back then. It was 1991, and my brother was a super homophobic. I was terrified he would have beat the hell out of me if he found out I was gay back then.
Number 3. Date night. This happened one summer when I went out to Kansas City. I was 19 years old at the time, and I had to leave my family's house. My parents were really both homophobic, and I never wanted to come out of the closet to them. Although some parents like that come around, I knew for certain that mine would not be them. I had a friend who had moved out there right after high school, who was a year above me. She was going to school out there, but her parents had rented her an apartment, so she didn't have to live in the dorms. She had always been so accepting of me in high school, and invited me to come out and live with her while I began to try and establish a life out there. She didn't have internet at the time, though it was in the late 1990s, so it wasn't easy for me to meet people. She invited me onto campus a few times, but honestly, I just didn't feel right there. So in order to meet people, I used to use phone lines. It was something to do in between the time that I was trying to find myself a job. For people who are too young to remember phone dating lines, they were a much worse way to meet people than meeting people online. It was way too easy for people to lie about who they were, because it was a much more difficult time to trace it when they tried to. So I had quite a few bad experiences meeting guys in that sort of way. But there was one meeting which could have put an ending to pretty much ever meeting anyone ever again. The person I met, Brett, was certainly older than he told me he was, but that was okay. I knew people lied about their ages often, and it wasn't that huge of a deal to me. Plus, I hate to sound like this, but I was broke at the time, and he offered to buy me dinner. It sure beat just staying at the house and being bored, so I went out to dinner with him. Now, one thing I never do in my opinion, is lead people on. But a lot of times, these phone dates always made me feel really awkward, thinking people generally expect sex or something afterward. But after the dinner, rather than ask me back to his place, Brett asked me if I wanted to go for a drive. I was totally up for that, and I felt like the pressure was slightly off to be expected to do anything. We drove around town and he pointed out a lot of the landmarks to me. I was happy for it, but I kept being surprised that he never offered to take me back to his place. He had already known that I was staying with a friend, so I never made an offer to go back to mine. This happened like 25 years ago, so I can't remember the name of the structure, but there was a bridge over a highway that was closed off for construction. He drove us out there. It was pretty late at night at the time, and it was the weekend, so there were not any people there. He parked his car and then asked me to walk out on the bridge with him. It was weird, and I honestly felt awkward about it, but I decided to go ahead and do it. I have to admit, it was pretty neat. It was pretty dark on the bridge, and it was high up, so it was neat watching the cars drive up and then under the bridge. I can't explain it, but it was sort of a neat feeling since I was already a bit apprehensive about heights to begin with. But the heights still made it kind of more fun. And then I felt Brett grab me from behind. He lifted me quick off the ground, as if he was trying to toss me over the railing on the bridge. Fortunately for me, though, I had quick reflexes and was in good physical shape, and was able to hold on to the railing and stop it. There was a small struggle at first, and this guy was seriously trying to throw me off the bridge onto the road. I did actually think that there was a chance that he was going to be able to get me over it too, but I had a good grip on the railing, and I was able to get some leverage. Looking under my arm, I could see where his knee was. I took my foot and I jammed it back against his knee. He yelled, but didn't immediately let go. So I did it again, and then he finally let go. I was able to get myself back on my feet and on the ground. Brett had almost fallen over, but he wasn't looking to attack me again. He quickly limped over to his car, got into it, and sped backward, really fast. He did all this really before I had much chance to react, but at least it was obvious that I had hurt him badly. I had no intention of going after him. I didn't have a cell phone or any money at the time, so I had to find my way back to my friend's apartment on my own. It took me quite a while to do it, and I had quite a story for her when I got home. I didn't spend much time in Kansas City. I never came across Brett again either, which was a relief.
Pride. Okay, so I'm gay. I have to get that out there first in order to tell you this story. And the reason for that is because of something that happened to me because of a complete misunderstanding that had truly nothing to do with me being gay. This happened in Chicago. I was taking El Tren to the Wrigley Field area in order to go to the Pride Parade. Strangely enough, there weren't many people in the car with me, only a few. There was one guy that was pretty scary looking. He was big, grizzled looking, and dressed like a biker of sorts. He had a vest on that covered part of his t-shirt, and there was something written on the t-shirt, but the vest was covering part of it. Well, I wanted to know what the shirt said, so I kept looking at the shirt, hoping he would notice me, but I guess that I looked at him too long, and he glared over to me. Well, the big guy got up and walked over to me. I was terrified. I was thinking maybe he thought I was checking him out or something, and I was right, because he told me, "I don't like homos looking at me." I was about to tell him I was just trying to read the shirt when he reached into his vest and pulled out a pocket knife. He very slowly opened it, keeping it hidden from the other riders. "I really hate your little pansy parades too." I was completely scared that the guy was going to stab me. I wanted to get up and run or yell to the other passengers, but I couldn't. I was frozen in terror. And right then the train stopped at the station. The moment the doors opened, he hid the knife in his vest, and at that stop at least 20 obvious Pride celebrators got into the train. I don't know if I've ever felt more relief like that in my entire life. The guy moved away while they were coming in. He realized he was outnumbered and went to a different car. I have never had something like that happen to me before or since. It's because of people like that we have pride.
Number 5. Jimmy. As a rule nowadays, I don't really date younger guys. Mainly stems from an experience I had when I was younger myself. However, I wasn't as young as the guy I dated. I was 27 years at the time, and I met this younger guy named Jimmy online. He had just turned 18 years old. Even at the time, I wouldn't have considered going out with someone who was that much younger than I was. But at the time, I really didn't know any other gay guys who were really into horror movies as much as I was, so I was willing to go ahead and go on a date with him just once. Well, it wasn't really a date. He invited me over to his parents' house one night when the entire family was out of town. He suggested that we could hang out and watch some movies together. So I went over to his house and had what I might still consider to be the weirdest first date of my life. It mostly consisted of us watching Tank Girl, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Day of the Dead together in that order. We had a nice little summer fling that was pretty cool. Neither of us took it really seriously, but we had a good time going to movies and out to dinner. But it ran its course throughout the summertime, and we eventually mutually parted ways. It wasn't until the next spring that I heard anything from Jimmy again. I was driving home from work. We were supposed to have some pretty bad storms that night. The storm system had been building throughout the day. Fortunately, I got home from work before it got bad. That was when I got online and Jimmy was talking to me. He was telling me how much he had missed me and wanted to hang out again. So he asked me if I wanted to come pick him up, which was an hour drive, and bring him over to my place. Okay, I really should have just said no, but I was excited again about the prospect of seeing him, so even though we were in a tornado watch, I decided to get on the freeway and go pick him up. This was surreal. It was only like 8 p.m. on a Friday night in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, but there was like no one on the road. It was completely empty, and I thought that maybe I was the dumbest person in the entire area. The idea only got worse when I got closer to Jimmy's house, and I heard the tornado sirens going off. I pulled up to Jimmy's house, and he came running out the door. As I got out of my car, he told me there was a tornado warning in the area, with 2 funnels having been spotted. I thought that he would want me to come into his house, but instead, he got into my car. He told me to drive as fast as possible to get to my place. So for some bizarre reason, I decided to try and outrun a tornado. It was when I got to the on-ramp that Jimmy got my attention. He told me to look, and I did. And off in the distance, I saw the tornado. It was behind us. Well, I took off fast on the on-ramp and got going. I can't explain how it felt, but I guess I felt somewhat safe because I had never heard of a tornado hitting a freeway before. Still, I was a bit frightened, trying my best to ride faster than a tornado. I don't know how many tornadoes were in the area, but the tornado sirens were blaring the entire 1-hour drive from his house to my apartment. All the time I kept expecting to run into a funnel or something like that. Of course nothing happened, or I wouldn't be sitting here telling you this story today. But it was a supremely stupid thing for me to do, and I was pretty terrified at the time. However, the dangers are not something I would ever take up again.
Number 6. Hustler. Yes, I was a hustler back in the early 90s. I was young, I was cute, so I figured why not. I got decent money for it, and got paid for sex. That was a pretty cool deal since I liked sex a lot. I never really got into trouble with anyone, except once. I was hanging out on a street corner, leaning against the building that I normally did when I was looking for business. A lot of the guys who pay for hustlers aren't the best looking guys in the world, but this guy pulled up in a nice sports car. He was young, hot, and wearing a leather jacket and asked to pick me up. He asked how much, I gave him the price, and he let me into the car. Well, I was expecting to go to a motel or something, but there are some guys who like to do it in the car. So he pulled into an alley, of which there were many in the cities. Well, I was expecting him to unzip, and I was really looking forward to it actually, but instead, he gave me this scary-ass smile, and my blood ran cold. "You're not getting into my pants, homo," he said. Ah, crap. I got picked up by a basher, I thought. I immediately grabbed the door handle so that I could get out of the car and run, but he grabbed my arm trying to hold me in the car. I was able to get the door open, but I was not able to get out the car. He was holding me tight and keeping me from getting out. It was quite a struggle actually, and I was really scared. He was pretty strong, and no matter what, I couldn't let go. I thought the guy was going to beat the hell out of me. My instinct took over, and I let him pull me back into the seat. I immediately made a fist and punched him right in the balls as hard as I could. He let go immediately and doubled over. I jumped out of the car and flew down the alley back the normal street. There was a clothing store right by the alley, and immediately I went in. Fortunately, although I was a hustler, I dressed nice and they didn't throw me out. I was about to ask for the phone to call the police, but saw the car pull out of the alley and drive off. At that point, I knew it would be pointless. I have a much better life now. I stopped hustling a year later and went to college and have a good job. And I have never had a basher get me since.
Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. First, I'd like to thank my friend Mortis Media for joining me on this collaboration. After you're done listening to this video, please use the links in the end of the video to go and see the second half of the collaboration on his channel. And make sure to leave him a like and a comment for his hard work. We've been doing these for a few years now, and I think they always turn out pretty good. So thanks for joining me, and I hope you could always do it again, buddy. In the meantime, if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. Leave a comment and let me know what you thought, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address included in the description. But for now, please don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.